out a statement, and I want you guys to raise your hands if you agree with the statement. Statement number 1, women do not deserve rights. Raise your hand if you agree. Taylor? Cam? I don't see your hands raised. All right, just making sure we're all on the same page here. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to Unapologetic Live, guys. I couldn't think of an intro, and once we get into the video that we're going to be reacting to, which is Jubilee, you'll understand why I came up with that intro. Today, Jubilee put out an episode titled, Is Gen Z Misinformed? Conservative Teens versus Liberals versus Moderates. Actually, it wasn't today, it was yesterday. But we're going to get into these. You know we love to react to the Jubilee Middle Ground videos and give you our stances on the different statements that they put out. For those of you who do not know the ground rules, Jubilee is going to present a statement. If you agree with the statement, you walk forward and sit in the circle. If you do not, you stand back and wait. The people who walked forward and agreed are going to have a conversation. Then the people who disagree are going to come forward and join that conversation. Let's get into it. This is Gen Z conservative teens versus liberal versus moderate.
Humans, welcome to Middle Ground. Keep an eye out for an interactive prompt in the middle of this episode. And thank you for watching.
Interactive. Our generation is misinformed. Are you guys walking forward for this one? And by our generation, we mean Gen Z. So you're going to look at this from the Gen Z perspective. My immediate, upon hearing it, I don't feel like walking forward on this. I think as far as misinformed goes, I don't think you can label an entire generation misinformed. I think Gen Z is more linked into information than any generation before it. So if they're misinformed, we're really all misinformed. So I guess you can put that blanket statement over everybody, but it's got to be over everybody.
Yeah, I'm almost like ready to skip past this part into like the actual conversation, because whether I say they're misinformed or informed is like
doesn't really matter.
It's kind of lanyap. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say probably the same. I think that you can't really make a generalization. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we're not walking.
We're all right down the middle.
We are right down the middle. We're moderates. There you go.
I do feel our generation is heavily misinformed sometimes because of social media. A lot of the times they just see movements as sort of a trend without looking into them, and I feel that happened so much. They'll just go with it, and I feel like a lot of the times it makes it very easy for us to kind of just be tailed by the government, and I feel that we need to do a lot better job at looking into things and really reading into things and starting to take facts over feelings.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
It's
Ben Shapiro.
just look at something and accept it as truth than to go and do your research and find counterclaims.
Looks like we need to boost the volume for the audience. People are saying in the chat.
There we go.
Aligns with that, because if you're just sitting there like scrolling through TikTok and somebody says that this is happening, I mean, like, who's gonna? It's not really.
Educate yourself.
Yeah.
I strongly agree with both of you guys. I think the reason why I was hesitant about walking over is even though I agree that our generation is misinformed, that doesn't mean that older generations aren't also misinformed, especially, in the form of, for like Gen X and the baby boomers or whatever. Cable news in particular, you have millions of Americans now who are tuning in every night to see Tucker Carlson spread misinformation. I don't want to pick on him in particular, but he's an example. Social media is just another example of what's been going on for generations and generations of people, just with all due respect, being too lazy to do their own research. And
Yeah, pause. I think we're in probably one of the most informed generations of our times, just by virtue of being so connected through the internet and just having this global connectivity to things that are happening in places far separated from where we are today. Like, I can wake up and hear about protests that young women are engaging in Iran, which is something that was never happening before unless you went and read the newspaper for the day and they were doing a report on foreign affairs. So that's a little different. And in that way, we are far more informed than we were in the past. But with that comes a susceptibility to false information, and that susceptibility is probably higher than ever because everybody has a voice now on the internet, and everybody has a voice on social media and is able to give their opinion or their firsthand account. Now, is that the same as what he says, like, baby boomers are getting from mainstream media? In a way, yeah. Mainstream media is pretty much towing the line of whatever agenda is supported by said network. So
Yeah. I think that as concerning as false information is controlled information. And I think that's across the generations a problem. And that's a problem when you have a centralized media apparatus that's curating what they want people to see. But the same could be said of our time is like, we're all worried about false information proliferating, but is there an equal level of concern about curated, controlled information? And big tech is just as capable of that in our generation as a media apparatus was in prior generations when it was all centralized under a few cable network channels or whatever.
Right.
So we're just as susceptible to propaganda, which is like, which side do we want to err on? Do we want to err on people who may be propagating false information, having the freedom to do so, or do we want to err on too much control over information from a centralized authority?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the debate we're seeing right now in the Twitter Elon Musk the battlefield, and the Elon Musks and the free speech absolutists of the world would say, hey, I'd rather bet on smart people to investigate facts for themselves and have the ability to do so than entities that are in the abstract controlling information and saying who's allowed to see what information. It's like, no, I'm gonna go ahead and let myself parse through all this and come to my own conclusions, then control what you're even able to ask about, what you're even able to see.
Right. It's exactly what's happening now. It's just like, it's so different than what we got with mainstream media. And yeah, that's exactly what's happening with Twitter. They're so scared of everybody being able to have a voice in the conversation that they're going to pin it on, false information and misinformation. That's what we're scared of. But really, they're scared of not being able to control the narrative anymore, in my opinion.
Just believing what other people tell them.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you guys, but I also wanted to add that as a generation, we don't have good examples of politicians and how they disagree and agree
She's
anymore. Right. When my parents were younger, they used to watch the politicians in the Senate and the House have like great lively debates and come to a conclusion in the end, and you would see how they were speaking and how they bounced off each other's opinions. And now that we don't have that example anymore, we're forced to get our information from social media, and a lot of the news channels these days are heavily biased. And because of that, I feel like as a generation, we're heavily misinformed. My dad.
Ooh, she's so right. And she's on the moderate side, as it says here, Sanvi. Clearly that's true. I mean, political discourse is just wrought with disarray and just disgusting rhetoric. I know you guys watched the presidential debates between Trump and Hillary and then Trump and Biden, and they were just horrendous. And to think that people in other countries might have tuned into that and watched those debates happening and thought that's a representation of American politics, which it is in today's day and time, but to even know that people are watching that and truly seeing what we're dealing with here is just makes my blood boil a little bit.
Yeah, it's not
so
a great
sad.
reflection of the state
So
of
sad.
American politics or just the state of how we handle public discourse. But
Right.
that is kind of where we are, which is sad. And so I guess, kudos to this girl for even pointing that out.
Right. I would watch those presidential debates, and these are grown ass people. We're talking in their 80s now, 70s and 80s, discussing political issues with each other. And then I was watching 15-year-old Gen Z people being invited on shows like Jubilee and having just normal back and forth and normal discourse. You have 15, 16, 17-year-olds having better conversations than our politicians are having on debate stages, which is
Wild.
terrifying.
Cam, I think the camera's still on me.
No worries. And it's no wonder that young people are growing up now and they're feeling so over both political parties. They're feeling over the entire system of politics that we're living in right now because they're engaging in better, really more good faith conversations than adults are engaging in.
Yeah, or at least there's an appetite for that.
Yeah.
I think that we criticize Gen Z as like not caring about anything, kind of having this nihilistic attitude. But I think a lot of that comes from like, look what we're handing them. Look at the options that we're giving. Look what we've modeled for them as like, yeah, this is politics. This is what we want you to get excited about and engage in. It's like, I don't want that. I don't, y'all do whatever you want. I'm just going to focus on my life and do my thing because that is not cool.
Exactly. And let's continue.
And I spoke to each other a lot about politics, and since I was a liberal at that time and he was a conservative, we would have a lot of debates. I would find myself growing and becoming more moderate just because the things he said and the things I listened to and the things I researched because of points that he made to me, I would find myself
transitioning into more of a moderate.
Disagree or stepping forward?
Karen Bass came up hard.
Ooh, there's
As a
a
single mom.
ad.
Not the Karen Bass ad. Let's skip it and move on.
I disagreed because in 2022, truth is becoming less and less objective and more subjective. And there will always be objective truth, but humanity will stray further and further from that, especially when a lie can be attached to an emotion. You see, we are thinking less and less critically and more emotionally as a whole. And so when you see something like, for instance, George Floyd, May of 2020, that just strikes your heart. First thing you want to do, go to Instagram and post a black square. Now, what is that doing? I don't quite know. But what it made you feel was like you did something to help that poor fellow who got a terrible thing that happened to him.
When I was here,
It sounded like he agreed with the prompt by the answer that he just gave. He said our generation is overcome with emotions, and we see things like George Floyd, and we immediately go and post a black square. And the prompt is our generation is misinformed. So it seems like he agrees with that to me. I would love to hear a little bit more of his answer.
Yeah,
That didn't feel right exactly.
yeah. You always get you get more insight from listening to the actual conversation than people's answers. But it's interesting to see like how people interpreted the initial prompt and where they land. But the meat is definitely in when they actually speak. So.
Right.
During this question, I was thinking like, is the majority of like my generation, aka the people I know, misinformed? And I would definitely say yeah. I feel like the lack of information is like almost as bad as like receiving the wrong information.
I want to touch up on something you said. I think it is true that social media did change the way we receive
I remember him
information,
from another video.
whether that is
Nathan.
misinformation or the truth. But that doesn't make us misinformed because of that. Obviously, like, yes, you have social media, it's so much easier to get information, but I don't think because we have social media that automatically makes you misinformed.
Sure. Ooh, it's so intense.